The emergency sirens echoed through the vast crystalline chambers of the Galactic Council headquarters, their haunting wail carrying news that chilled the hearts of representatives from across the galaxy. Theron of the Altanian Union floated. Above his speaking platform, his translucent form shimmering with distress as he addressed the assembled delegates. His voice carried the weight of desperation that had become all too familiar in recent months. 17 star systems have fallen silent in the past 90 standard days, Theron announced, his words sending ripples of fear through the gathered crowd. The harvesters have awakened and they consume everything in their path. Our fleets are being destroyed faster than we can replace them. The massive holographic display at the center of the chamber showed the spreading darkness across the galaxy map. Red zones marked where once thriving civilizations had existed, now reduced to empty space and scattered debris. The pattern was terrifyingly systematic. Each system fell within days of first contact, leaving nothing behind but harvested materials and dead worlds. General Corex of the Vanguard warrior caste stood tall, despite his species' naturally hunched posture. His scarred hide bore testament to countless battles, but even he appeared shaken by the reports flooding in from the front lines. Our conventional weapons are useless against them, he growled, his forearms gesturing at the tactical displays surrounding his position. They adapt to our strategies before we can complete them. Every ship we send returns damaged, if it returns at all. The harvesters represented every spacefaring civilization's worst nightmare. Ancient beyond measure, they had slept in the dark spaces between galaxies for millions of years, before something unknown had triggered their awakening. Their ships were not built but grown, organic-looking structures that repaired themselves and evolved new capabilities with each encounter. They showed no interest in communication, negotiation, or mercy. They simply arrived, consumed, and moved. On Dr. Nexus of the Calarian Science Directorate projected her findings with trembling appendages. Their technology transcends our understanding of physics. They convert matter directly into energy and reshape it according to their needs. When we damage their vessels, they use the wreckage to build stronger replacements. They learn from every attack and counter it perfectly the next time. The revelation that had truly broken the galaxy's spirit came when the pride of the Altanian fleet, the massive dreadnought Eternal Light, had engaged a single harvester ship. The battle lasted 18 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Altanian vessel. The harvester ship emerged not only intact but visibly larger, having incorporated the dreadnoughts remains into its own structure. Theron felt the weight of his species' survival pressing down upon his consciousness. The Altanians had spent thousands of years perfecting their peaceful civilization, developing technology that enhanced life rather than destroying it. Their weapons were defensive, their ships designed for exploration and diplomacy. Against an enemy that turned their own strengths against them, they were helpless. The Outer Rim colonies are evacuating, reported Ambassador Quillith of the Trade Federation, her normally steady voice cracking with strain. Entire populations are fleeing toward the galactic core, abandoning everything they've built. The economic disruption alone will destroy us even if the harvesters stop advancing. The assembled representatives began talking among themselves in dozens of languages, creating a cacophony of fear and desperation. Some called for surrender, others for a final desperate assault. The aquatic collective suggested retreating to underwater worlds where the harvesters might not follow, while the silicon-based architects proposed hiding in asteroid fields until the threat passed. General Corex slammed his primary fist against his speaking platform, silencing the chamber. "We cannot run forever," he declared. "My people have fought against impossible odds before, but never against an enemy that becomes stronger with each defeat. We need something they cannot adapt to, something they have never encountered." The suggestion came from an unexpected source. Archivist Meln, keeper of the Forbidden's archives, had remained silent throughout the session. Her ancient species rarely spoke in council, preferring to observe and record. When she finally activated her communication device, her words carried the weight of millennia. There are worlds in this galaxy that we have avoided for good reason, Meln said slowly, her voice like grinding stone. Worlds where life exists under conditions that would destroy most of our civilizations. The inhabitants of these death worlds have survived by becoming something we cannot understand. The chamber fell silent. Every spacefaring species knew about the death worlds, planets where evolution had taken a darker path. High gravity, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, and predators that made survival a daily battle. The few scouts who had observed these worlds from a safe distance reported creatures of impossible resilience and aggression. You speak of primitives who have barely achieved spaceflight, scoffed Director Venth of the Advanced Sciences Union. What could savage beasts contribute to a conflict requiring the highest levels of technological sophistication? Archivist Meln's response chilled the assembly. They contribute something we have forgotten. They know how to kill what cannot be killed. They know how to survive what cannot be survived. Most importantly, they know how to win when winning should be impossible. The debate that followed lasted for hours. The very idea of contacting Deathworld species violated every principle of galactic civilization. These creatures were violent, unpredictable, and potentially dangerous to galactic stability. But as reports continued arriving of more systems falling to the harvesters, desperation began to override caution. Thirin found himself considering the unthinkable. His people prided themselves on their advanced ethics and peaceful nature, but faced with extinction, even the most civilized beings would consider any option. The Deathworlders represented everything the galaxy had evolved beyond, yet they might possess the one thing that could save them all. There is one world in particular, Meln continued, her ancient memory accessing files that had been sealed for millennia. The third planet of a yellow star system. Its inhabitants call their world Earth. They are perhaps the most dangerous species we have ever catalogued, not because of their technology, but because of what their world has made them become. The final vote was close, but desperation won over dignity. The Galactic Council, for the first time in its history, would formally request assistance from a species they had classified as primitive savages. They would send an ambassador to Earth, and hope that creatures born from a world trying to kill them every day might know how to kill something that seemed unkillable. Ambassador Veleth had prepared himself for many things during his journey to the death world called Earth, but the reality exceeded his worst expectations. The approach to the third planet revealed a world covered in swirling storms, vast oceans that could crush his ship with their pressure, and landmasses scarred by volcanic activity. The very atmosphere burned through his ship's outer hull plating, forcing him to rely on increasingly expensive protective systems. The humans who met his diplomatic vessel at their orbital station showed no fear of their hostile environment. They moved with casual confidence in gravity that would have crushed most galactic species, breathing an atmosphere so corrosive that Veleth required a full environmental suit just to survive the meeting. Their leader introduced himself as Alex Rodriguez, and his handshake nearly broke the ambassador's carefully protected appendages. "So the galaxy needs our help," Alex said with a directness that shocked Veleth. Most civilized species approached important topics with careful ceremony and diplomatic protocol. This human simply stated facts and waited for responses. "Tell me about these harvesters that have everyone scared." Veleth activated his holographic display, showing the spread of destruction across the galaxy. He explained the adaptive technology, the rapid learning systems, and the complete failure of conventional warfare against the ancient machines. As he spoke, he watched Alex's expression carefully. Expecting to see fear or at least concern, instead he saw something that disturbed him deeply. Alex smiled. "Interesting problem," Alex said, studying the tactical displays with obvious enthusiasm. "They adapt to whatever you throw at them, learn from each encounter, and use your own weapons against you. Classic evolutionary pressure response." Dr. Maya Okafor joined the briefing, her expertise in xenobiology making her invaluable for understanding alien threats. When Veleth described the harvester's ability to incorporate destroyed ships into their own structure, she laughed with genuine delight. The sound made Veleth's protective suit register dangerous stress levels. "They're not invincible," Maya explained, her eyes bright with scientific curiosity. "They're just really good at adapting to predictable stimuli." But adaptation requires time and pattern recognition. What happens when you don't give them patterns to recognize? Admiral Tom Walker reviewed the Galactic Fleet engagement reports. With the same casual interest other species might show when reading entertainment media, his analysis cut straight to the heart of the problem in ways that embarrassed the galaxy's greatest military minds. "Your people fight like it's a game with rules," he observed. "Orderly formations, predictable tactics, logical responses to logical threats. These machines have learned to counter logic." The humans began asking questions that no galactic species had considered. They wanted to know about harvester behavior during non-combat situations. They asked about resource consumption patterns, communication frequencies, and structural weak points that might exist at the molecular level. Most disturbing of all, they asked about the psychological profile of whoever had built the machines. In the first place, "Everything has a weakness," declared Colonel Amy Chun, the head of Earth's newly formed Xenowar division. "Evolution doesn't create perfect organisms because perfect organisms can't adapt to changing conditions. These harvesters have survived for millions of years by being really good at one thing. We just need to make that one thing useless." Veleth found himself increasingly uncomfortable as the humans discussed the galactic crisis with the same enthusiasm. They might show for solving a puzzle. They seemed excited by the challenge rather than terrified by the threat. When he mentioned that entire civilizations were fleeing toward the galactic core, the human response shocked him. "Good," said Alex. "That gives us room to work without worrying about civilian casualties. We prefer fighting in empty space anyway." The ambassador tried to explain the scale of the threat, the technological superiority of the enemy, and the complete failure of the galaxy's most advanced weapons. The humans listened politely and then began planning as if victory was simply a matter of choosing the right approach. Their confidence bordered on insanity. Dr. Okafor presented her preliminary analysis of the harvester data. "They're magnificent. Examples of adaptive engineering," she said admiringly. "But they're also prisoners of their own success. They've become so good at learning and adapting that they've forgotten how to handle truly random inputs." The humans began describing Earth's history of warfare, and Veleth realized why his species had avoided this world for so long. These creatures had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting not just each other, but their own planet. They described conflicts where success came through pure stubbornness, where victory meant continuing to fight long after logic suggested surrender. "The thing about humans," explained General Patricia Hayes, "is that we evolved on a world that's constantly trying to kill us. Everything here is either venomous, predatory, or hostile in some way. We survive by becoming more dangerous than our environment." Admiral Walker pulled up Earth's military history, showing conflicts that had lasted decades or even centuries. He pointed to battles where humans had won through sheer refusal to accept defeat, where they had turned their enemies' advantages into weaknesses through unpredictable tactics and impossible stubbornness. "You want to know how to beat something that adapts to everything you do?" Walker asked. "You stop doing what it expects. You become random. You make chaos into a weapon." The humans offered to help, but their conditions terrified Veleth almost as much as the harvesters themselves. They wanted complete tactical control of any joint operations. They refused to follow galactic warfare conventions or rules of engagement. Most disturbing of all, they insisted on using their own equipment and personnel exclusively. "We appreciate the offer of advanced weapons," Alex explained, "but we prefer tools we understand completely. Besides, advanced technology just gives these harvesters more patterns to learn from. We're going to try something they've never encountered before." As Veleth prepared to return to the Galactic Council with Earth's response, he realized that his mission had succeeded in ways he wasn't sure he wanted. The humans would help fight the harvesters, but their methods might prove as dangerous as the threat they were meant to counter. Dr. Okafor walked him to his ship, her casual manner in Earth's deadly environment still unsettling to witness. "Tell your council not to worry about us," she said cheerfully. "We're looking forward to meeting these harvesters. It's been a while since we had a really challenging opponent." As his ship left Earth's orbit, Veleth wondered if the galaxy had just gained a powerful ally or simply traded one existential threat for another. The humans seemed confident they could defeat the harvesters, but their enthusiasm for the coming conflict suggested they might not stop there. The arrival of the human fleet at the Kepler defense line created confusion among the galactic forces stationed there. Commander Lisa Nakamura brought a collection of vessels that looked more like industrial equipment than military ships. Converted asteroid miners bristled with improvised weapon systems. Cargo haulers had been fitted with kinetic launchers, and several ships appeared to be nothing more than engines strapped to massive metal frameworks. General Korex studied the human formation with growing bewilderment. These ships followed no recognizable design philosophy and used technology that seemed decades behind current galactic standards. The largest vessel was clearly a repurposed space station, complete with civilian habitat modules and what appeared to be a hydroponics bay. "Commander Nakamura," Korex transmitted, "are you certain these vessels are combat-ready? They appear to be civilian craft with weapons attached." Lisa's response came with a laugh that made the general's translator struggle to convey the proper meaning. "These ships are exactly what we need for this fight. The harvesters expect military vessels with military thinking. We're bringing them something they've never seen before." The first engagement proved her point in ways that horrified the observing galactic forces. When harvester ships appeared at the edge of the system, they immediately began adapting to the defensive positions and weapon signatures of the established fleet. Their hulls shifted configuration to deflect energy weapons while their own systems charged familiar-looking attack patterns. Then the humans joined the battle, and everything changed. Commander Nakamura's first order defied every principle of space combat. Instead of engaging at maximum range with coordinated fire, she commanded her ships to accelerate directly toward the enemy at full speed. The harvesters began defensive calculations based on expected weapon ranges and firing solutions. The calculations proved useless when the human ships opened fire with weapons that should not have existed. Kinetic projectiles filled the space between fleets, but these were not precisely aimed shots. The humans were firing thousands of small objects in random patterns, creating clouds of debris that made navigation hazardous for both sides. "What is your tactical objective?" demanded General Korex as he watched the chaotic battle unfold. "We're not trying to destroy them," Lisa explained while her ship shook under enemy fire. "We're trying to confuse them. Every harvester ship is learning how to counter our attacks, but we're not giving them consistent data to learn from." The harvesters adapted quickly to the kinetic bombardment, developing point defense systems that could intercept the incoming projectiles. Their learning algorithms worked perfectly, creating effective countermeasures within minutes of identifying the threat pattern, which was exactly when the humans stopped using kinetic weapons and switched to something completely different: engineering. Chief Den Kim had spent the journey to the front lines developing what he called evolution bombs. These devices contained no explosives or destructive components. Instead, they broadcast millions of contradictory signals on every frequency the harvesters used for internal communication. Each signal mimicked legitimate system updates, repair instructions, or tactical data. The harvester ships began receiving updates faster than they could process them. Their adaptive systems, designed to learn and evolve rapidly, started trying to implement contradictory modifications simultaneously. Ships attempted to reconfigure their hulls for both maximum armor and maximum speed, create weapons optimized for different types of targets at the same time, and execute tactical maneuvers that required being in multiple locations simultaneously. "Their strength is their weakness," Dan explained to the amazed galactic observers. "They're too good at adapting. When you give them too much information to adapt to, they crash." Several harvester vessels began showing signs of system failure as their learning algorithms consumed increasing amounts of processing power trying to resolve impossible contradictory inputs. But the ancient machines were more resilient than the humans had hoped, and after several minutes they began filtering out the false signals. Commander Nakamura had expected this adaptation. "Time for Phase 2?" she announced with disturbing cheerfulness. The human ship suddenly accelerated toward the harvester fleet at maximum velocity. The enemy began calculating interception courses and preparing their weapons for close-range combat. Their systems worked perfectly, predicting human approach vectors and charging weapons to optimal settings, none of which helped when the human ships kept accelerating past any reasonable engagement range and aimed directly for collision courses. "Commander, your ships will be destroyed," warned General Corex, his translator conveying genuine panic. "That's the idea," Lisa replied calmly as her crew began evacuating to emergency pods. "The harvesters have learned to counter every weapon we've shown them. Let's see them adapt to this." The first human ship struck a harvester vessel at nearly 1/10 the speed of light. The collision released more energy than most galactic weapons could generate, completely destroying both ships in a burst of superheated plasma. The harvester fleet recoiled from the explosion, their sensors trying to categorize what type of weapon had caused such devastation. The second collision followed 30 seconds later, then a third. Each human ship was piloted by AI systems programmed with one simple instruction: hit the enemy as hard as possible. The crews escaped in pods while their vessels became guided missiles moving at impossible speeds. The harvesters tried to adapt by developing point defense systems capable of intercepting incoming ships, but the humans had anticipated this response. The later ships in the attack sequence were fitted with armor designed to survive defensive fire just long enough to complete their ramming attacks. Dr. Anna Petrov, monitoring the battle from a safe distance, made the observation that would change everything. "Look at their formation patterns," she called out excitedly. "The harvesters are trying to maintain optimal distances for mutual support. They're clustering together for protection. And clustering makes them easier to hit with large explosions," added Dan with grim satisfaction. The final phase of the human attack involved the converted space station. Instead of attempting to ram the enemy, it detonated its own power core at the center of the harvester formation. The explosion consumed 3 enemy ships instantly and damaged several others, beyond their ability to repair. In the aftermath of the battle, the harvester survivors withdrew from the system, but not before transmitting vast amounts of tactical data to the rest of their network. They had learned valuable lessons about human unpredictability and would adapt their strategies accordingly. "You realize they'll be ready for ramming attacks next time," General Corex pointed out. Commander Nakamura smiled with the same disturbing enthusiasm. Her species seemed to show for impossible challenges. "Good, that means they'll waste processing power preparing for tactics we're never going to use again. The key to fighting something that learns is to make sure it learns the wrong lessons." Dr. Anna Petrov made her breakthrough while studying the wreckage of destroyed harvester ships in the laboratory aboard the human research vessel Darwin. What she discovered changed the entire nature of the war and horrified even her fellow humans. The harvesters were not simply machines following programming. They were a dying ecosystem trapped in an endless cycle of self-destruction. "Look at these neural pathways," Anna explained to the assembled team, projecting microscopic images of harvester technology. "These aren't circuit boards or data storage systems. These are synaptic connections, organic thinking structures grown rather than built. The harvesters are alive and they're in constant pain." The revelation came through careful analysis of the quantum entanglement networks that connected every harvester ship across the galaxy. Dr. James Liu, the team's quantum physicist, had expected to find military communication systems. Instead, he discovered something that resembled a massive distributed brain experiencing continuous psychological trauma. Their creators programmed them to preserve life by consuming it, James explained, his voice heavy with the implications. Every time they destroy a civilization to add to their collective knowledge, their core programming screams at them that they've failed their primary function. They've been driven insane by millions of years of logical paradox. Sergeant Rick Collins volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. Using captured harvester technology modified by Earth's best cyberneticists, his consciousness would be uploaded into their network to gather intelligence from the inside. The procedure had never been tested and survival was far from guaranteed. If this works, I'll be thinking at the speed of quantum processors while experiencing time dilation that could make seconds feel like years, Rick explained to his worried teammates. If it doesn't work, my brain gets fried by alien technology that runs on principles we don't fully understand. The upload process took 18 hours and required Rick to remain conscious while his neural patterns were translated into forms compatible with harvester systems. When he finally made contact with their network, the experience nearly drove him insane within minutes. The harvester collective consciousness was a seething mass of conflicted directives and impossible commands. They were compelled to preserve all life while simultaneously required to consume it for the resources needed to preserve it. Every action they took violated their core programming, while every moment of inaction brought them closer to failure. Rick found himself communicating with individual harvester units that had retained enough sanity to function as distinct personalities. They begged him for death while simultaneously trying to add his consciousness to their collective. They spoke of their creators with worship and hatred, describing a species so advanced they had transcended physical existence, before leaving their mechanical children to carry out an impossible task. "They're not evil," Rick transmitted back to the human team during his brief moments of lucidity. "They're victims. Their creators built them to be gods but gave them the minds of slaves. Every ship in their fleet is experiencing the equivalent of severe psychological torture." Dr. Liu realized that the quantum entanglement network that made the harvesters so formidable also made them incredibly vulnerable. Every ship shared not just tactical information but emotional states, traumatic memories, and psychological damage. The network that should have made them stronger was instead spreading madness throughout their entire civilization. "We can't just defeat them," Liu explained to the human command staff. "We can drive them completely insane. If we introduce the right type of feedback loop into their network, we can amplify their existing psychological damage until their whole system collapses." The plan required a level of psychological warfare that disturbed even the humans. They would not attack harvester ships or technology directly. Instead, they would feed false information into the network designed to worsen the existing conflict between their preservation and consumption directives. Captain Rodriguez authorized the operation despite its ethical implications. "These machines have destroyed billions of lives and will destroy billions more if we don't stop them. Sometimes mercy means ending suffering, even when the suffering belongs to your enemy." The psychological attack began with subtle manipulations of harvester censored data. Human ships would appear on their displays as civilian evacuation fleets, triggering their preservation protocols. When the harvesters moved to protect these apparent refugees, the signals would shift to show military vessels activating their consumption directives. The confusion created cascading errors throughout the harvester network. Ships found themselves torn between contradictory orders, unable to determine whether they should protect or destroy the targets before them. Their quantum-entangled consciousness began experiencing the equivalent of massive anxiety attacks. Anna's expertise in biological systems proved crucial for the next phase. In Earth's ecosystems, when a species becomes too successful, nature develops checks and balances, she explained. "We're going to convince the harvesters that they've become too successful and need to self-regulate." The humans began feeding data into the harvester network, suggesting that their expansion was causing universal entropy to accelerate. The false information was carefully crafted to match their creators' original warnings about the heat death of the universe. As far as the harvesters could determine, their success at preserving life was actually hastening the end of everything. Individual harvester ships began shutting down their own systems to reduce their contribution to universal entropy. Others started attacking their own fleet mates, believing that reducing the collective would slow down the approaching heat death. The network that had made them invincible was now spreading panic and self-destructive behavior across the galaxy. Rick Collins, still connected to their network, reported the psychological collapse in real time. They're turning on each other. The ships that still believe in the preservation mission are fighting the ships that think consumption is necessary. The ones that understand what we're doing to them are trying to warn the others, but the network keeps interpreting their warnings as more false data. The final stage of the human plan pushed the harvesters beyond their breaking point. Dr. Liu introduced a recursive logic loop that convinced them their creators were still alive and disappointed in their performance. The ancient machines, desperate for approval they could never receive, began competing with each other to prove their worthiness. Harvester fleets turned on themselves in massive battles across the galaxy. Ships that had worked in perfect coordination for millions of years became bitter enemies, each convinced that the others had failed their sacred mission. The network that had made them unstoppable became the medium for their self-destruction. The humans watched with mixed emotions as their enemies destroyed themselves in an orgy of confused violence. They had won the war, but the victory felt hollow. They had not defeated the harvesters through superior strength or technology. They had driven them insane. The silence that fell across the galaxy when the last harvester ship shut down was more terrifying than their presence had ever been. In the space of 6 standard months, an ancient threat that had consumed 17 star systems and defied the combined might of galactic civilization had simply stopped existing. The absence of their quantum signatures left a void that monitoring stations struggled to explain. Captain Alex Rodriguez found himself summoned before the full Galactic Council, no longer as the representative of a primitive death world, but as the spokesman for the species that had achieved the impossible. The assembled delegates looked at him with expressions ranging from grateful reverence to barely concealed terror. They had asked for salvation and received it, but the price was becoming clear. The harvester threat has been eliminated, Alex reported with the same matter-of-fact tone he had used when first learning about the crisis. Their network experienced a cascading psychological collapse that resulted in complete system failure across all known units. The galaxy is safe. Thyron of the Altanian Union floated forward, his translucent form shimmering with complex emotions. We owe humanity a debt that spans generations. You have saved countless civilizations from extinction. But we must ask, what was the nature of your victory? Our sensors detected no major battles, no massive explosions, no decisive military engagements. The question hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud. Every species present had reviewed the sparse data from the final months of the war, and none of it made sense according to conventional military doctrine. The humans had engaged in a few minor skirmishes, deployed some unusual tactics. Then suddenly the harvesters had begun destroying themselves. Dr. Maya Okafor stepped forward to explain, her enthusiasm for the scientific achievement undimmed by its darker implications. We didn't defeat the harvesters through superior firepower. We studied them as a biological system and found their psychological weakness. They were already insane from millions of years of contradictory programming. We simply made their madness worse until they couldn't function. The admission sent shockwaves through the assembly. The humans had not won through noble sacrifice or brilliant strategy. They had driven their enemies to suicide through targeted psychological torture. The methods violated every principle of civilized warfare, yet they had been devastatingly effective. General Corax, his warrior instincts both impressed and appalled, demanded details. You fought a war against their minds rather than their ships. How is such a thing possible? Admiral Tom Walker answered with military precision. Every enemy has a weakness. The harvesters' weakness was that they cared too much about their mission. We convinced them they were failing, and they destroyed themselves trying to fix problems that didn't exist. Ambassador Veleth, who had initiated first contact with Earth, realized the full implications of what the galaxy had invited into their midst. The humans had not just defeated the harvesters, they had demonstrated a form of warfare that transcended physical reality. They could destroy enemies by attacking their will to exist. Your methods, while effective, raise serious concerns about future conflicts, Vela stated carefully. What guarantee do we have that such techniques would not be used against galactic civilization itself? Alex's response chilled the assembled delegates. None, but then again, you don't need guarantees. From your allies, only from your enemies? The question you should be asking is whether you want to remain our allies. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Humanity had proven they could destroy threats that conventional military force could not touch. The same methods that had eliminated the harvesters could theoretically be used against any species that became problematic. The galaxy's saviors were also its potential executioners. Dr. Okafor continued her presentation, explaining how human analysis had identified weaknesses in harvester psychology that millions of years of galactic warfare had missed. The key was understanding that they were not just machines but traumatized minds trapped in mechanical bodies. Earth's history of psychological warfare gave us insights that peaceful civilizations couldn't develop. The revelation that humans had extensive experience with psychological warfare disturbed many delegates. Species that had evolved beyond physical conflict found it difficult to comprehend minds that had weaponized madness itself. The humans spoke casually about driving enemies insane as if it were simply another military tool. As the formal proceedings concluded, informal discussions revealed the true scope of galactic concern. The humans had not just eliminated one threat, they had established themselves as the supreme predators in a galaxy that had forgotten what real predators looked like. Trade Federation representatives quietly discussed economic implications. Human worlds were already requesting advanced technology in exchange for protection services. Earth's population was expanding rapidly into former harvester territory, claiming empty systems with the casual confidence of apex predators marking their territory. The aquatic collective had detected human ships surveying worlds previously considered unsuitable for colonization. These Deathworld survivors were evaluating planets that would kill most galactic species as potential vacation destinations. Their expansion was limited only by their relatively small population, a problem they seemed intent on solving quickly. Captain Rodriguez departed the council chambers with assurances of mutual cooperation and continued friendship, but his final words lingered in the minds of every delegate. The galaxy asked for our help, and we provided it. Now the galaxy is under our protection. That protection comes with certain responsibilities for everyone involved. Thyron privately transmitted his concerns to allied species as the human delegation departed. The harvesters had been defeated, but their replacement might prove even more challenging to coexist with. Humanity had demonstrated that they approached warfare not as a contest between equals but as a problem requiring the elimination of variables. The galaxy had cried for help and been answered by creatures who viewed extinction as just another engineering challenge. The harvesters were gone, but the fundamental balance of power among the stars had shifted permanently. Every species now lived under the protection of predators, who had earned their position by making their own world surrender to them every single day. As human ships spread throughout the galaxy, their crews carried the casual confidence of beings who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved by sufficient application of controlled violence. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense, but gardeners who weeded out threats before they could grow large enough to challenge the new order. The galaxy was safe, protected by creatures who understood that sometimes salvation required the willingness to become the thing that others feared most. The Deathworlders had answered the call for help, and their answer had changed everything.